In every neighborhood, there is at least one house that people whisper about. On Maple Lane, it was the house with the lilac tree. The house itself was ordinary peeling paint, crooked mailbox, cracked front steps. But everyone remembered the lilac tree because it bloomed late every year. When all the others had shed their flowers, this one would stand there defiantly, purple and fragrant, as if it were holding on to something the rest of the world had already let go. Inside that house lived Mrs. Evelyn Hart, and inside that house was a room nobody had entered for 20 years. The door to that room was on the second floor, last on the left. Its brass knob was polished every week, wiped carefully with lavender polish, yet no key ever turned it, no hand ever pushed it open. Children said the room was haunted. Teenagers dared each other to run up to the front porch and shout through the mail slot. Adults lowered their voices when talking about it, but the truth was simpler and heavier. Mrs. Hart had locked the room on a winter afternoon and kept the key on a chain around her neck ever since. "No one goes inside," she said whenever anyone asked. Ever. And no one did, until the day a child opened it. The child's name was Noah. He was 8 years old, full of questions, blessed with the fearless curiosity that adults forget how to have. He had moved into the neighborhood only a month ago with his mother, who worked long shifts at the clinic on the main road. Because his mother worked so often, she had asked Mrs. Hart, who everyone simply called Aunt Evelyn, to watch him after school. Aunt Evelyn agreed. No one ever expected her to say yes to anything involving children, but she surprised them all with a small smile and a nod. "He can stay," she said, "as long as he is not noisy." So every afternoon Noah came to the lilac house. He would do his homework at the kitchen table while Aunt Evelyn made tea. Sometimes they sat in silence. Sometimes she told him about plants and birds and the names of different clouds. He liked listening to her voice. It was like old music, soft, cracked around the edges. But Noah also noticed something else. There was one door upstairs that was always locked. He saw it the first week. He had been playing with the cat, whose name, ironically, was Dog, when the ball he was bouncing rolled toward the staircase and he chased it up. At the end of the hallway he saw the door. It didn't have dust like the others. The knob gleamed. The wood looked newer than everything else in the house, as if time had stopped touching it. Before he could stop himself, his hand reached for the handle. "Don't." The word wasn't loud, but it froze him harder than any shout. Turned. Aunt Evelyn was behind him, one hand on the banister, the teacup trembling slightly in the other. "You must never open that door," she said. Her voice was steady, but he saw the fear behind her eyes, fear not of the room, but of what it held. He backed away and nodded. He didn't ask why. Children can feel when a question should not be asked. From that day on, the rule settled in his mind like a sign. Do not open the door. So, didn't, for a while. Time moved the way it always does with children, slowly at first, then all at once. Summer came, hot and lazy. Noah and Aunt Evelyn found rhythms together. He helped her water the lilac tree. She showed him family photo albums that never left the living room cabinet. There were pictures of a man with laughing eyes. There were pictures of a boy in a sweater far too big for him. There were school certificates, drawings, and birthday cards, carefully tied with ribbon and placed in boxes. Dust never touched those either. "Who is he?" Noah asked once, pointing to the boy. "My son," she said simply. "What's his name?" She looked for a long moment at the smiling face in the photo. "Daniel." She didn't say more, and Noah didn't press further. But the house whispered stories anyway, in the way old houses do. There was an extra place set aside in the cupboard for a mug that was never used. A bicycle, too small for an adult, rested in the shed with its tires flat yet lovingly wiped clean. In the hall closet, a red scarf hung untouched, smelling faintly of winter. And upstairs, the locked waited, not with malice, with patience. It happened on a September afternoon. Rain had arrived without warning, soaking the world in silver sheets. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The power flickered once and went out. The house grew dim and quiet. Aunt Evelyn sighed and went downstairs to find candles. Noah, holding Dog the cat like a fluffy shield, waited at the top of the stairs. Then heard it. A soft click. The sound a latch makes when it finally gives up resisting. He turned. The forbidden door was open just slightly, the width of 2 fingers. Perhaps the change in temperature had shifted the frame. Perhaps a failing lock had simply surrendered. Perhaps, as children are fond of believing, the house itself had decided the time had come. His heart hammered. He remembered the rule. He remembered voice. But he also remembered another voice, the one in his own head that said, "Sometimes doors open because they must." He didn't push. He only touched the wood, and it swung inward. The room that time forgot. It was not dark inside. Even with storm clouds outside, the room felt gently lit, as if the light in it came from memory rather than the window. Dust motes floated lazily, yet nothing seemed dusty at all. The room was beautiful. Not grandly beautiful, quietly beautiful. Like a held breath. There were untouched books stacked neatly on a small desk, each with a ribbon bookmark marking halfway read pages. There was an unfinished sweater on a chair, needles still pierced through soft blue yarn, waiting for hands that had set it down only for a moment. There was a calendar on the wall, its paper yellowed with age, the date circled in red ink. January 14th. The year was 2 decades ago. Every object waited. The bed was made but not stiff, the sheets slightly rumpled as if someone had just stood up. A pair of shoes sat side by side beneath it. On the desk lay a letter that hadn't been sealed, words frozen mid-sentence. A faint scent of soap and winter air lingered, impossibly preserved. The room, abandoned. It was paused. Noah stepped inside. He felt as if speaking would break something sacred, so he didn't. His small fingers trailed the edge of the desk. He saw a photograph in a wooden frame, the same boy from the album, Daniel, smiling with a missing front tooth. He looked alive in a way photographs rarely do, as if he might laugh at any second and mess up his own hair. On the bed lay a scarf, blue, half knit. Noah turned slowly as the floor creaked behind him. Aunt Evelyn stood in the doorway. For a long time she didn't move. Her gaze washed over the room like a wave over old sand, uncovering memories buried but never forgotten. Her hand rose to the chain around her neck, the chain where the key had hung for 20 years. The key was missing. It dangled in the lock. She hadn't even realized. Rain murmured against the window as she stepped inside. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "You opened it." "I'm sorry," Noah said quickly, eyes wide. "I know," she said gently. She sank into the chair by the desk, touching the sweater with trembling fingers. It was bound to happen. He waited. Children are better at silence than adults give them credit for. He didn't rush her. He didn't ask the question she knew he had. She looked at the calendar. January 14th. He left that morning, she said. The snow had fallen all night, and the whole world looked clean. He wanted to ride his bicycle to the library. He said he'd be careful. He always said that. Her fingers closed around the unfinished sweater. "I was making this for him. He kept teasing me that I would finish it in summer, and he would melt wearing it." She smiled, but it broke halfway. "He hugged me at the door. He smelled like soap and cinnamon. The radio was playing his favorite song. We laughed because he slipped on the steps and bowed like a clown to pretend it was on purpose." She swallowed. "That calendar, I circled the date so I'd remember to pick up his school report. He was so proud of it." Noah listened, heart thudding in quiet dread. He never came back. The words were simple. They landed like snow, soft and devastating. "There was ice on the hill near the library," she continued. "His bicycle slid. People rushed. They did everything they could. It was over in minutes, they said, but to me it has never ended." Her voice cracked fully now. "I locked this room that afternoon. Everything stayed exactly as it was. His bed unmade, his books open, his sweater waiting for me to finish it. I thought, if I didn't change anything, then maybe time would bring him back to it." She laughed through tears, as if grief obeys magic. Noah stepped closer, not too close, just enough to let her know he was there. "I wasn't afraid of this room," she said softly. "I was afraid of what would happen if I opened it, afraid the memories would fade if I let them breathe." She looked at him then, eyes glistening. "But they didn't fade, did they? They lived in me. They lived in the lilac tree he planted with his little shovel. They lived in the mug I couldn't get rid of, and the bike in the shed, and the way I still listen for a voice calling Mom from the stairs." She took a deep breath. "And now you've opened it." He waited for anger that didn't come. Instead, she reached out and put her hand on his cheek with surprising strength. "Thank you," he blinked. "For opening it, for allowing time to move again. They spent the rest of the afternoon together in the room. They didn't clean anything or pack anything away. She wasn't ready for that yet, and maybe never would be, but they didn't treat it like a shrine anymore either. She told him about the books on the desk, and about how Daniel always said he'd become a writer or an astronaut depending on the day. She showed him the unfinished letter, a thank you note to his teacher for encouraging him. She picked up the blue yarn and smiled ruefully. I forgot how to knit years ago, she said. I can learn, Noah replied. We can finish it together. Tears slipped down her cheeks again, but this time they were different, not the hard, heavy tears of grief, but the warm, aching tears of release. What happened on that date, she said quietly, answering the question he hadn't asked, is simple and impossible at the same time. A boy I loved went out into the snow, and the world went on without him. She looked at the calendar once more, and for 20 years I refused to follow. Lightning flashed outside, but in the room there was only gentle light. Thifeta. The lilac tree blooms. Word spread as it always does in small neighborhoods. People noticed the upstairs window open for the first time in years. They noticed Aunt Evelyn trimming the lilac tree with Noah by her side. They noticed her attending the small winter fair in town, wearing the red scarf that had hung unworn in the closet for decades. No one, the wrong thing. No one asked. But when she smiled at them now, it reached her eyes. She still kept Daniel's room, still dusted the desk, still straightened the photograph. But now the door stayed slightly open, never locked. Sometimes she sat inside quietly, knitting with clumsy fingers while Noah read aloud from Daniel's books. The sweater grew, row by row, not because the boy who was meant to wear it would return, but because love doesn't die just because time passes. It changes shape. It becomes story. It becomes lilacs blooming later than all the others, stubbornly beautiful. 20 years and 1 day. On the 21st anniversary of January 14th, the calendar still hung on the wall, but a new date was circled now, January 15th. The day after, the day life continued. Aunt Evelyn placed the finished blue sweater on the bed. It was a little uneven. A few loops were wider than others. The sleeves had been restarted 3 times because Noah had dropped stitches and she had forgotten how to count properly. It was perfect, she whispered. I love you, not to the room, not to the sweater, but to the air that carried memory and laughter, and the sound of bicycle wheels on ice. Then she left, door open. Epilogue. What the child learned. Years later, when Noah himself had grown, he would remember many things. He would remember the smell of lilacs. He would remember rain on a September afternoon. He would remember a woman with tired eyes who taught him that grief wasn't a monster in a locked room. It was love that had nowhere to go. He would remember the calendar stuck on a date, and the moment it became unstuck. And whenever someone told him some doors shouldn't be opened, he would smile gently and think, some doors shouldn't stay closed forever either. Because the room nobody entered for 20 years did not hold ghosts. It held love paused in time, until a child opened the door and let it breathe again.